focus question of this project that I've been working on all quarter revolves around the question, what does being an educated look like? What does being an educated look like? What does an educated person look like?
I am the
I am person educated. What does being an educated person look like, and what does it have to do with school? Obviously, we're doing this in Phasmophobia, a video game about ghost hunting and standing in fires, and doing weird character models. Because that has been part of the monitoring experience, because I wanted to examine how education works outside of a traditional school system. So, and also I'm tired of writing essays, and video games are fun. So we talked about it briefly yesterday, but Phasmophobia could be a metaphor for the education system, where you have grades and feedback and all these different parts that I'll add in a voiceover right now.
I've used Phasmophobia specifically because I think it's a game I can incorporate the concept of seriousness as defined by John Wilson. So, and I think there's a relationship here between interest and seriousness, which is something we'll explore a little bit later in the video. So Phasmophobia is a very multi-layered game. It's complex, and there's a lot of feedback given to the player, similar to how a good education system should work, in my opinion. It's complex, there's lots of learning, skills as far as game mechanics goes, facts and figures, what the ghosts do, what the tools do, how those two interplay, social emotional learning, it's a horror game, and then there's a social dynamic as well. It's multiplayer. And learning comes not just from the game, it's from other places too. There's online resources, YouTube and the wiki, the social dynamic, fear responses, amongst others. It's also learning a system, not just root facts and figures. It's that you can learn new things based on structures and systems that you've already encountered, like learning a new game based on other games you've played, and it's a synthesis of learning.
William?
Oh, it's hunting. It's hunting.
Ooh, get in my place.
We're gonna get there next, man.
Oh, it got me! No, my cinematic experience.
It's very dark in here with a candle.
It is.
We then moved to the abandoned high school to discuss some of our initial thoughts of what the qualities of an educated person are.
It's sort of fitting that I'm talking about school stuff while we're in a school.
Yeah.
A creepy school.
Here's our center.
Okay, let's make a little circle. Generally, educated people are, or have done a lot of schooling. This is kind of the cultural norm, which I don't think is necessarily how an actual educated person can be defined. I don't think there's maybe a correlation there, but it's not causation. So you don't have to go to school to be educated, but going to school perhaps helps you be educated. Book smarts can help you prepare to learn in the real world, which I think is where the relationship between school and being educated comes into play. But there's a lot of qualities that you don't learn in school that you do need to have to be an educated person. And I think generally I've noticed this, I think in part because of our friend group in high school and what we've all chosen to do. So with the fire department and vocational jobs or IT or Victor and the SEALs, none of those are traditional academia jobs, and yet they certainly if you're proficient at them, which you guys all are, you have to be an educated person to be proficient in them. There's a lot of different skills and stuff that you definitely did not learn in school, or school didn't necessarily explicitly prepare you for. So that's sort of this disconnect that I started this school year with, trying to figure out where did that come from. Here's a question I'll pose to you all. What are some qualities of an educated person?
I feel like educated people might have better social skills.
Just that being educated doesn't necessarily mean you thrive in social environments or really any environment. School gives you the tools to operate, or should, if it's a good school, give you the tools to operate in life beyond that system. But yeah, not all people apply them in all areas, which completely makes sense.
I think I would agree with that. like there's not one definition of like good social skills with an educated person, but it's like a general theme or quality that school is supposed to support.
Yeah,
it doesn't always.
Definitely. No.
Yeah. So,
and same to be said with any subject or any career someone wants to approach. Like, you get the tools to do all that, but it kind of takes you putting yourself in that situation or using those tools.
Yeah.
To thrive.
What do you guys think about like gaming and gaming culture as like education?
I mean, Henry's 12, like you guys know him, and like they were teaching him history in Minecraft. Like he was a part of that class that got to do that, or just that time period. Yeah. I mean, we didn't do that at all in school. Like, I mean, I guess we had Typer Shark.
Oh, yeah.
That's like the most.
I mean, you got like Oregon Trail back with like Apple IIs and stuff, 30, 40 years ago.
Yeah.
Well, it's definitely been there a while.
And I was thinking that, like, so when you're learning a new game like Phasmo or Halo or Raft or something, it's like this entirely new system that you have to learn. And by playing all these different games in different social environments, especially like just playing with randos, you're suddenly putting yourself into all these different social situations with new rules and like totally new systems and ways of thinking. I don't think you get that in school because it's like so structured and it's the same basically every year. Yeah, I like almost wonder if that's why some people, I mean, I think you all would be examples of people that grew up gaming a lot and I think have taken a lot away from that to apply to other areas like self-direction and like risk-taking and things like that, where in school like you're punished for it basically with grades, but you screw up in Phasmo and it's like a fun learning experience, but you do your essay wrong and like you get an F and then you fail English. It's like, what's the learning outcome of that? Like, what did you learn by that failure? Nothing, basically. Yeah. So
yeah, it took me until college to actually find a good math teacher, and his approach was exactly kind of that, in a sense, where you weren't punished for doing bad on a quiz. He would take extra time with you and make sure you know the formula and like are comfortable with that before moving to the next, because in the normal system typically you get an F and you go on to the next thing. You never actually grasp that. So
I think there's a relationship between learning the book smarts, so kind of like what you do in school, and then actually applying them in the real world. Like, I think, Macklin, you've probably experienced this the most with Fire.
There's I'd say there would be like a difference between like knowledge and understanding. Like, you could memorize every single fact in a book, but that doesn't mean you've understood it.
With that discussion wrapped up and two of our team ghost victims, we packed up the operation and moved to a more secluded townhouse to wrap up the night and recap our thoughts.
Coming for ya!
He walks away. Oh, he's good. Oh, I see him.
He's running fast.
There's another lighter on the table by the plate, by the glow stick. In case you want to eat a glow stick too. Don't eat a glow stick, that's bad for you.
Don't microwave a glow stick.
Eat a glow stick.
We first responded to the concept of productive versus reproductive in an education system, tying it in with constructive thinking and the ability of an educated person to synthesize knowledge centered around but not related directly to a concept, which would likely be a job or career.
The first one. This one's actually pretty interesting. So, it comes from Becoming Educated, A Journey of Alienation or Integration. And basically, it's the concept is the difference between productive or reproductive. I feel like while higher education is supposed to be productive, so making new knowledge, I think generally the education system is really built on reproductive ways of thinking.
I feel like the majority of the jobs, at least in this country, tend to be like service industry or manufacturing jobs that don't exactly require critical thinking, but might need you to know, what's the word? It would help if I knew the word to make my point.
That is an interesting point you've made, because I have a word for you. Constructive thinking. It differs from critical thinking in that you use contextual knowledge as well as critical thinking skills. Because I believe for any job as an adult, you do need critical thinking skills, but you use those all in synthesis to like function at a high level. What do you guys think about the reproductive versus productive as far as the schooling system goes?
Definitely high school.
Yeah.
It's definitely one of those.
Yeah.
Ooh, door closed or opened.
Yep.
But I mean, like,
yeah, right there.
if you're just there to get like enough of an education to go work at like a restaurant or something, where it's your day-to-day is more or less the same, and your only real problem solving is when you don't have something or something doesn't line up with the instructions you were initially given, then, you know, high school's probably good enough.
I was thinking about that in like terms of like when I work construction. Like, yes, literally I was just digging ditches, but like working, like, yeah, it's basically that. But also the like, there were so many different levels to it, especially working around like heavy machinery, that you like had to incorporate a lot of different types of thinking and like synthesize a lot of different like contextual knowledge to like function at a high level. Because it kind of like relates to the like a social hierarchy almost of jobs, right? Like vocational jobs are generally thought of as like lesser for some reason. People that work those jobs aren't necessarily less intelligent, so maybe that's where like the concept of educated comes in. Like maybe like it's a hierarchy of education.
I mean, one could say that getting a job that pays well without having to spend a bunch of money to learn how to do that job might be the smarter decision.
This is true. And then are you more educated because you've got a better job that pays more, and like that's your measure of success?
Like, did you make the smarter decision there?
Yeah.
Oh, even the EMF reader.
So EMF agrees. Okay.
Ghost, would you like to interject?
Yeah.
There has been a quote that has stuck with me all year. I read it out to the group to see if we shared a similar response to it.
Each person is the author of the situation in which one gives meaning to one's world, but through action, through one's project, not by well-meaning thoughts.
Because it's like, the first part could mean like, because the author's job is to tell a story, right? But there's many ways to tell a story. Depending on your outlook on life, some bad situation could be viewed as good, and vice versa. You could be disappointed in a good thing happening.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, it matters what you do with that versus how you think about it, I guess.
So like taking action versus inaction.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like you could see a situation and be like, well, this sucks, and do nothing about it, and then it does suck. Or you could actually do something about it and make it not suck. Being an educated, you might see getting an internship or maybe a lower paying job as like not an ideal thing. Versus like if you're uneducated, you might be like, wow, I have a job now, I can actually afford to eat now. Even though it's like most people are in the same situation where they need a job to eat, but taking a fast food job as someone who has like a college degree generally is considered a negative thing, whereas someone who may have just gotten out of jail or something might actually be happy about taking that same job.
One's actions or inactions follows how one perceives the world, which is in turn related to how educated a person is, and maybe more importantly, what kind of educated a person is. Establishing this, we explored the connection between knowledge and understanding.
We were talking about like knowledge versus understanding, like
Knowledge.
Nah, a book could tell you how to do something, but like without actually understanding it, is it even like valuable?
Yeah.
Like I found with like especially math, like yes, I could just do what the book says to do for this equation, but like understanding what it's actually doing for me, like how the equation works, and like what are the benefits or where I'd use it, that's the actual valuable part.
Applying it in the real world.
Yeah, like how could this apply to real world situations? When would I use this, and why would I use this? Like, why am I learning this?
Yeah.
Like that. Yeah. That's almost more valuable than knowing the actual equation itself. Because like I could always look up the equation on like Google or something, but without knowing to use that equation in the first place, it's worthless.
Education comes not from the action of doing, it comes from the depth of understanding that action. This quote is from Stout in The Art of Empathy, Teaching Students to Care, sums up our thoughts well. Rilke warns against borrowing answers from others, following the conviction that true learning comes only through experience.
Seriousness. This is from John Wilson. So, of the times or like things that you were successful at, what was a common thread that led to that success?
Common thread.
Yeah, like what was a behavior that you engaged in that like led to you learning that thing?
Actually being interested.
Yeah, I can second that.
Like wanting to learn it or being like actually engaged.
Yeah, same. Getting me out of the T-Mobile store into a job where I can actually learn things.
I've had several projects that I just don't do anything for like a week, and then like for some reason that day I'm like actually engaged. Things are clicking. I'm like, oh yeah, that makes sense. Oh yeah, this ties into that, and then it gets done.
So kind of what we've talked about of like what is an educated person. Do you think all these things are things that school supports or teaches?
Maybe that last one we were talking about.
Interest?
Here and there.
Sort of, or like the procrastination with procrastination.
Yeah.
Because it's like you got different types of homework, right? But it's like you might like math homework more than science homework. So you're like, well, I'm gonna do my math, so I don't have to do my science.
Do you think these are like explicitly taught, or they're all sort of like just things you learn as a result?
Hey.
Hey yourself.
The environment probably does sort of encourage specific behaviors from I think a lot of people. With the way the school is, yeah, it's just like do homework, get grades, that's it. Like the goal is getting the grade. It's not learning.
These last thoughts perhaps underline a key takeaway from this monitoring experience. School doesn't educate, but it does provide the basal parts to support growth to education. The difference in outcomes relies heavily on the school's, in a classic, get out what you put in mentality. This suggests that schools need to focus on fostering ownership, agency, and a sense of seriousness, promoting students to take investment and interest in their own learning. Through these channels, educated individuals grow.
Yes, I think school teaches you like ways to become an educated person, as like, you know, just use that term because we're talking about it, but it does it through a really roundabout way that's like not really that productive and like really problematic. So like, yeah, the end goal is the same, but
I mean, you could cheat your whole way through school and have the same result, and as far as the system's concerned, you passed. Like,
yeah, and you learn to be a really good cheater.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, like the goal is just to put down the right answers on the piece of paper, and that's it.
Yeah,
more or less, and do work. But like, you can still cheat on that too.
On a final note, I think the term educational value needs to be redefined. Through this project, I've contested the traditional view that video games are synonymous with rotting your brain out. While my final thoughts on the matter are still in flux, I suggest that the value in video games for education is rich and largely untapped. I mean, I just did my final project for a graduate level class in one, didn't I?